Come on by and have a bite at the Crossroad Diner, the place your spirit goes when it might be time to change direction. It's Monday once again, and John Burnett and I are talking finding your purpose, finding your mission. Welcome back to the Crossroad Diner. Steve McCurdy and my friend John Burnett. We're talking purpose and having you figure out what that is for you. And it's going to be messy. John and I have argued in a very friendly way for the last hour on how we want to go about doing this because we have different approaches. And what that brought to both of our minds, you can nod if you agree and shake your head if you don't, is that it is individual. It's a completely individual experience and journey. So what we're going to do is give you examples of how we understand it so that can help you develop your own understanding. But for me, purpose is sort of built into your structure. And you have been doing things on and off purpose throughout your life. And when you're on purpose, it feels pretty good. And when you're off purpose, it doesn't feel as good. But if you don't sort that out, and if you don't come up with a value system that you understand and articulate, and you may have to modify over time, you never are certain about decisions. You feel like you get lucky sometimes. So there are stories, and in the Crossroad Diner, first of all, let me stop. And then, John, can you react to some of that stuff that I just said?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I love the fact that it is going to be messy. Life is messy. And 3 points in a prayer very seldom change a life. Not that it can't, don't get me wrong. But we are individuals. We are so unique. So we all have unique experiences, unique personalities, on and on and on. The way we were raised, the places we were raised, all of that. And so it is going to be messy. But I think the one thing that we can, and even the terms, right? You use purpose instead of purpose, meaning the same thing. I use mission. You have personal purpose. I talk about personal mission. But we're talking about the same thing. So that's probably going to be a little bit messy. I want to make sure everybody knows that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the same idea of this reason we exist, this purpose for being, what I call your mission for being. And so that's going to be messy. And then really just, I think that was probably the only other thing I wanted to say. So I'm good. I think that's
okay, Well, one of the things that John suggested was that we talked to you about how we came here, how we came to the place where I wanted to do a podcast, where he wanted to be a part of it, how we got into it, and he was willing to work with me on giving you these points. I wrote the musical The Crossroad Diner 16, 17 years ago, and the central character is named Will, and that's sort of, because he's trying to figure out what the heck his will is for his own life. He has had some success and some failure, and he just doesn't feel like he gets it. He doesn't really know what he needs to do next. And so even though all these people come in and they talk and they do this and they figure out where they're going to go next, and the trains come and they get on the train they think is going to take them there, he can't pick a train because he does not know where he wants to go. And that's a really great place for him to be, because now he realizes instead of just life being improvised, he wants to go somewhere. He wants to be himself. He wants to be who he is. But he's got to figure out who that is first and what those base values are. And so that's what brought me here, is trying to create tools that you can use, that anyone can use, to understand themselves and the wiring and the software that was built into them before they got here, that makes it individual, and that what will satisfy and be fulfilling to them is already figured out. But they've got to figure out what that is, because we got all these distractions. And then today, the power company here in my city burned up the power to the people 2 doors down. And so we were getting ready to hit record. They knocked on the door and said, yeah, we're going to knock the power off for about half an hour. So you never know what's going to happen, but we knew that we wanted to get this thing done. Now, Will is in the Crossroad Diner is my way of explaining how I want to create tools and understandings that you can come to about who it is that you are, why you are here, and what it is that you want, and then how you're going to go about doing that with every decision that you make. You'll be in the Crossroad Diner for a few minutes every day for the rest of your life. John's got another story. I think it's the exact same story, but it comes in a different way. Tell us about him.
Yeah, it's
John.
so interesting. I think I just connected the dots because it was about 16 years ago that a friend of mine who it had taken me about a year. So about the same time you created your Crossroad Diner play, right? I had spent about a year working to get an appointment with a guy named Dan. And Dan was in Houston. Dan was Dan was the man. This guy had it all going on. And when I finally got in to meet with him, we quickly became close friends. And we would get together and we would have lunch or we would just meet. And it would be about deep questions, deep thoughts, and things that one of us were wrestling with. And a lot of it he was throwing at me. And he was 5 years my senior. But he was hitting me with a lot of challenging questions that forced me to think about my life. But let me tell you, Dan was the senior vice president of J. Walter Thompson Houston, which at the time was the largest advertising agency on the planet. His sole responsibility was Shell North America marketing. So at that time, I think they're still in the top 3 or 4, but Shell was the largest company on the planet. So this guy, top of the game, running the largest branch of the largest advertising. His responsibilities for one of the largest clients on the planet. He had it. He had the right clothes. He had the answer to every question.
Poster boy for success.
Yeah, yes, he was. He had the right car, the right house, the right everything. And so what happened on his 47th birthday truly shook me to my core. I took him out to lunch, and we were talking about this and that, and I was just kind of celebrating him because he is such a fantastic guy and a great friend. And Dan says, John, I got to tell you the truth. As I'm sitting there pumping him up, he says, I got to stop you and tell you the truth. He said, at some point in my 20s, I feel like without a doubt, God told me to turn right, and I turned left, and I've been going the wrong way ever since. Now, at that moment, my people pleasing, no, that's not true, Dan. I shifted into encourager mode, and I started telling Dan all the reasons that wasn't true and how many lives he's changed and impact that he's had everywhere. I mean, he is truly had lived a remarkable life. At 47, his 47th birthday.
Get behind me, Satan.
And he goes, hey, I hear you, but that doesn't change the fact that I feel like I've been going the wrong. Now, we kind of wrapped up that lunch without, putting any kind of bows on that discussion other than me saying, no, you have lived a life of purpose, and him going, turn the wrong way. I got on the plane to fly back to Dallas, and I just sat there and thought to myself, I remember pulling out a notepad and going, is this you? I don't feel like it's me. I feel like I've been living a life of purpose, but I've never defined it. I've never had clarity that I'm for sure going the right direction, but I have felt like the decisions I've made, don't get me wrong, a lot of screwed up, you get to know John Burnett very long, you'll find out real quick what a jacked up human being he is and has been at any given moment in his life. So it wasn't like living perfection, but overall felt like I was moving the way I felt like I was created to move. But it started me on the journey to kind of prove that out and to find out how I could help people like Dan. And so eventually that took me to a place where I actually hired a coach Her name is Lori Beth Jones. I was in a workshop where we actually helped people define their mission statement. And that's where it all started for me. That's where I kind of took what she's learned, started putting my own spin on it, but did what you're talking about, which is started creating the tools, looking at my own life because I've lived a while, and to help look and see how did I get unstuck at times. Why did I feel like I lived on purpose? And eventually it took me, and I don't think this is necessarily a spoiler alert or anything, but eventually it took me to the point where I defined my personal mission. And I believe, in fact, this year, one of my kind of personal goals is to start writing it down every day, that I believe I exist to passionately inspire others to more of what they were created for. I believe that I exist to passionately inspire others to more of what they were created for. And I remember we were in a swimming pool. My now ex-wife, we were helping each other create our personal mission statements, and we'd been working on it for a while. And hers, she nailed it. I mean, it was perfect. I wasn't able to do anything to improve hers, but she's like, something's missing. And I'm like, okay, well, what? And she said, anybody who's ever known you for like 5 minutes has described you as passionate. And it just seems like the word passion should be in there somewhere. And she said this because we were married, and she could say this without hesitation. For better or worse, you're passionate. Because sometimes my passion would spill out and, maybe hurt some people if I get a little too excited, right? And so that's when I went back in and added to passionately inspire others to more of what they were created for. That has become the filter, my mission. It's what I try to, it's the reason I'm here. It's the reason I coach. It's the reason I speak. It's the reason I'm going to write a book.
So let me ask a question.
Yes.
What changed once you understood that?
Honestly, for me, it became a North Star. So while I could look back on my life, and I was like in my young 40s, right? So I was probably 41, 42, 43, somewhere in there whenever I actually got to the point where I defined it. And the reality that I could look back at that point and had the benefit of hindsight. So I could ask my mom, hey, did this describe me when I was younger? I could ask at that time. My wife and I have been married for probably 15 years or so she could give me very clear, feedback on whether or not that truly was my life. The reason I exist. I had a lot of friends that could back that up or not, and so it didn't necessarily. Like my life didn't shift suddenly, but all of a sudden I had something that I could go to, and I memorized it very quickly. And I encourage people when I help them to find their mission statement. I ask them all the time, "So what's your mission statement?" Oh, I'm like, no. This is like, if it's going to be your North Star, it needs to be your North Star. And if it's not, let's go back to the drawing board and make sure we're clear that this truly is why you exist. Now, just a note on that. I have a worldview, as you know, of being a Jesus follower, and I believe in heaven, and I'm going to get to heaven. And I think there's a chance that God says, that mission statement was pretty good. It wasn't exact, but it was. But here's what it is. I know that it's enough of who I am and why I exist that it does give me clear guidance. If somebody asks me to do something that does not include people, for instance, I know I'm not on mission. And I still have to do that sometimes, but that is not. If I spent the majority of my time, I don't know, working at a fishery, that wouldn't work for me because that is not why I exist. But some people are. Some people are all about animals and that part of God's creation. I think that's fantastic. I've got a great example of somebody that is that way.
So Dan had things that he was really, really good at, really competent at. It was so easy for him, but it wasn't aligned with a thing that he didn't even know what it was that was his North Star. And so he had that sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction. And we see this all the time. Houston's, the premier place in Houston for the longest time was called River Oaks. It's right past downtown. It's where all the mansions are. And I've had so many people say there are more miserable people per house in River Oaks than in the fourth side of town. And because they're good at a thing that isn't them. You can be very good. And that's the temptation. The temptation is, I'm great at this and I'm successful at this and other people are rewarding me like crazy. How can I walk away from this and spend time trying to figure out something else that I don't know whether I'm going to be very successful at, but it's authentically me. But that is the challenge. And I think a lot of people get to legacy time, which, you and I are on the backside. I'm way ahead of you down that hill.
Hey.
You get to that place and you start really wanting to make sure that you're who you are, that you do have meeting, and that you are closer to being you were equipped and sent to be. And so our goal over the next these next session, because we're going to wrap this one up today, that today's focus was on what is a mission? What is it? And it's a statement of who you are, and it takes some work to get there. Talk with your friends. Look at yourself. Look at the things that are important to you and the victories and why there are victories for you. And start trying to formulate what your mission statement is, because it's the foundation on which everything else we're going to talk about mechanically will stand.
Yeah,
anything to add to the tag?
I like to say that we were created human beings, not human doers. And so the idea of who we be, who I be, who you be, that piece of it is huge. And your kind of point of people doing things that they're miserable at, the reality is that and a lot of times they do it as financial, right? And so money is a horrible guidance counselor. Purpose is a great one,
but not necessarily a comfortable one. Okay, on that note, we will step out, and thanks for stepping into the Crossroad Diner. John and I will see you next Monday. I will see you on Thursday with another great story of a person who has been in the diner and has been at this place. And I'll be asking them, do you have a purpose? Do you have a mission statement? Do you know who you are, or you want to become more of? Till next time, John, Steve, thanks for coming to the Crossroad Diner.
Be with us next Monday as we dive a little deeper into how you identify and move more intentionally into your mission, your purpose, and find greater satisfaction in the directions you choose, the roads that you walk, and the impact that you have. Next up on Thursday, another interview, this time with Rob Denblecker, and how starring in the original Crossroad Diner musical altered the direction of his life in dramatic ways. See you next time in the Crossroad Diner.